Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be doing my first quarterly wrap-up. I decided this year to do quarterly wrap-ups instead of monthly wrap-ups. If you've been around my channel for a long time, you will know that wrap-ups and I don't get along. As Anthony Bridgerton once said, they are the bane of my existence. However, since I don't vlog every single book that I read, a lot of times there will be books that I have read and I want to talk about, but there's really no opportunity for me to talk about unless I do wrap-ups. So I figured the quarterly wrap-ups will work, so every 3 months I will talk about all the books that I read. I thought a fun way that I could do it is instead of talking about every single individual book, I have a list of questions that I will be answering about all the books. So I actually took the questions from the end of year reading survey, and then I added a bunch of other questions that I felt like were interesting or relevant. Let's just start with a couple quick stats. So in January, February, and March, I read a total of 31 books, which came out to 10,617 pages. Shocker, romance was my most read genre. 19 of the books were romance. The longest book that I read was Outlander. This is 850 pages. And then the shortest book that I read is King Sized by Jessica Kane. This is only 85 pages. Here's a graphic of all of the books that I read, but now let's get into some of the questions. A book that lived up to the hype. But I think that the one that I lived up to the hype, I'm gonna say Finlay Donovan is Killing It by El Casimano, solely because I think that this was making its rounds on BookTube and everybody loves this book and I loved it as well. It is so funny. So I think that this one definitely, for me, lived up to the hype. And then alternatively, a book that did not live up to the hype, I'm gonna have to go with A History of Wild Places by Shea Earnshaw. Not that this was a bad book, but I know that this was on a couple people's favorites lists. I think a lot of people were really loving it. For me, it just ended up being a 3-star book. It was not what I was hoping that it would be. A very big part of why I wanted to pick up this book was this sort of like magical element to it that ended up disappearing after the first chapter and they never mentioned it again, so definitely did not live up to the hype. A book that felt like the biggest accomplishment, no surprise here, it definitely has to be Outlander. I never planned on reading this book solely because of how long it is. I listened to this on audio and the audiobook is like 36 hours. It is so absurdly long. I did really enjoy it. I really like overly descriptive writing, and that's totally what this is and why it's so long, because Diana Gabaldon describes everything in detail and I enjoy that. So this did feel like a very big accomplishment. It took me a while to read it as well. Book with my new favorite character. Okay, I'd have to say I really loved Finlay, but specifically I loved, what was her name? Her sidekick, Vero. I loved Vero because she was totally how I would be in this kind of situation. And then another character that I loved was the main character of The Push. This one is a book about a mom who is not connecting with her daughter and she thinks that her daughter is like evil. It was just so fascinating reading from this main character's point of view and like being in her head. I really enjoyed her and like her struggle with motherhood. So I would say those are probably 2 of my new favorite characters. Then we have my favorite romance hero. For this one I also have 2 answers. So I have Nicolaj from Stolen Air. I loved him. He's definitely my favorite Sophie Lark hero so far. But then the other one who's like top tier for me is Pestilence from Pestilence by Laura Thalassa. I just loved him. Pestilence is one of the 4 horsemen and he doesn't understand anything about humanity. And so watching him like taste food for the first time and experience attraction and love and be very confused by why he's feeling all these things, it was just nice. Everything was like very new to him. And I also loved how I've heard people describe this type of hero as being an alpha mellow. So like an alpha, but like also a marshmallow, because he's very mean to the main character, which it's warranted because at the beginning of the book, she like brutally kills him, but doesn't realize that he can come back to life. So he is very angry at her for doing that and is very mean to her. But then there's like these little like droplets of moments where you can just tell he has a huge heart and like cares. I love him. Then we have my favorite romance heroine, and for that one, I would choose Frankie from Always Only You by Chloe Lees. She's probably one of the characters that I have related to the most. People assume that she's a lot more closed off and like mean than she is, and she has a really hard time like opening up to people. I just loved her so much. So she's definitely my favorite heroine from all of these books. Then I have my least favorite character. So I have two answers, but like technically only one. So one of my answers is Achilles from the Song of Achilles, but I have always disliked Achilles, so I knew going into this book that I would not like him, and I did not like him, so that's not a surprise. However, my actual least favorite character, I don't even remember his name, but he's the hero from Mafia Mistress. When I tell you I hated this man, I hated him. He treated the heroine like absolute garbage the entire book. Where I said that Pestilence is an alpha mellow, this hero is just an asshole. He's an alpha asshole. I like a mean hero, so I could have overlooked a lot of the things if there had been moments of kindness, but there weren't at all. He was just mean all the time, to the point where it just felt cruel, especially because it's dual perspective, so you get his point of view. The only way he talks about the main character or views the main character is through how she can give him sexual pleasure. That's it. Like the whole book. I don't understand how this is a romance. It's not a romance. I hate him. I hate him so much. Okay, the next one is the most shocking book or moment. And I don't necessarily know if this was like the most shocking in the sense that like it was a plot twist that I didn't see coming. It was more just this book gave me the biggest reaction, and that is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. I mean, you guys saw it in that video where I read this. I live recorded my reaction to the ending of this book. I knew it! Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And this is probably gonna end up being, if not my favorite book of the year, definitely in like the top 3, the top 5. I loved this book so much. And actually, now that I think about it, I wanna add the main character in this book is definitely up there with my favorite characters. My favorite couple, there's absolutely no question about this. If you guys can't already guess this, I feel like I've done something wrong. That's the couple from Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. This is my top favorite couple ever, not just out of these selection of books, but ever. I've said this a million times already. They are soulmates. They are soulmates. You can't convince me otherwise. There is no other couple that I feel like is so perfectly made to be together, destined to be together, other than these two. And I had a couple people ask me like if I could do a soulmates romance recommendation video, but like I started trying to put together a list, and just comparing any other couple that I think are soulmates to them, it's like they're not even on the same planet. They do not compare. So the next one is the best written book. I definitely think that The Push is the best written. This is a very ambitious book. It's a debut. It's written in second person entirely as a letter from the point of view of a bad mom. There was just so many things that I feel like could have gone wrong with this. Second person is very, very hard to do. I've said this before, when it's done well, it is my absolute favorite, especially books written as letters. I feel like if you look at some of my all-time favorite books, they are books told as letters. This is How You Lose the Time War, A Dowry of Blood. It's very ambitious for a debut book, and it absolutely worked for me. The next one is a book you want the most people to read. So I have two answers for this, and they could not be more different. So the first one is, if you are a dark romance reader, you absolutely have to read Still Beating. You just have to. It is required reading if you like dark romance, and it's the best romance that I've ever read. And I do want to push as many people to read this as possible. However, since it is so dark and deals with very triggering topics like sexual assault, I'm like hesitant to push it on everybody. But if you feel like it's something you can handle, absolutely try it. But the other book that I would recommend to literally everybody is Legends and Lattes. So this is a cozy, low stakes fantasy. I said this in my review, but it's very much like if you took the world and characters of Dungeons and Dragons and put them in Animal Crossing. That's what this is. This book is all vibes and cozy atmosphere. It is one of the most enjoyable, fun, relaxing books that I've ever read, and I feel like this is a book I would go back to a lot, and I absolutely think everybody should read it. Even if you don't like fantasy, it's just about an orc opening a coffee shop in a neighborhood, and like there's an eclectic cast of characters, and they're just opening a coffee shop, and it's so cute. The next one is my favorite book cover. So I have two, and I actually realized that they're very similar. I think that there's a key thing that I like on book covers, and that's skulls. So we have The Never King and Black Sunshine. I love both of these covers. They both were cover buys for me. Something about skulls I just really enjoy. A book that made me cry the most, there's only one book that made me cry, and that is Still Beating. I cried a lot. Pretty much like I cried through this entire book. I got a little bit misty at the end of this book, but it wasn't like full waterworks like this one was. A book that made me laugh the most. I don't find that a lot of times books are funny. I don't know if it's just like humor doesn't translate as well in books, but I did read two that I thought were genuinely funny. Finlay Donovan, extremely funny. One of the funniest books that I've read. And then the other one, Legends and Lattes. This book was like, I don't know if it was necessarily like laugh out loud jokes funny, but there was a particular character in this book that I just found hilarious, and every time he was on page, I was just giggling. Then we have a new favorite author that I discovered. I feel like I discovered a lot of new favorite authors. Ashley Winstead, I'm very excited to read her next book. I will read whatever Ashley Audrain came out with. I'm actually just realizing they're both Ashleys. But two authors who were new to me this year and I've read multiple books from already are Laura Thalassa. I read the first two books in this Four Horsemen series and loved both of them. And then also Chloe Lees. I read the first two books in this Bergman Brothers series and loved both of them. So these are definitely two new authors that I can say are favorites because I've read multiple books from them. I don't usually like to call an author a favorite until I've read multiples. So like Jennifer Hartman, even though this is probably my favorite romance of all time, this is the only book that I've read from her, so I don't know necessarily if I could call her a favorite author yet, but I do have all of her other books on my TBR, so hopefully she will be a favorite author soon. A book that was the biggest surprise, so I definitely would have to say that In My Dreams I Hold a Knife was a surprise in the sense that I did not think that I would love this as much as I did, to the level where like this might be a favorite book of the year. Biggest disappointment, number one, Mafia Mistress. That book was ass. That book was just pure ass. I hated that book. And I had such high expectations for it because it's mafia. It's about a woman forced to become engaged to the son of this mafia king. And instead of falling for the son, she falls for his dad. But both of these main characters were just like dumb as bricks. And you know what? Like they deserved each other because they were terrible. They were terrible. He was the biggest asshole ever and she had no backbone. So yeah, that was a huge disappointment. The other one that I would say is a big disappointment, I think, is Savage Lover by Sophie Lark, simply because I love this series so much. Stolen Heir, amazing. But this was 3 stars. It was fine. It wasn't terrible, but comparative to the other books that I've read in the series, not great. The newest release that I've read is Praise by Sarah Kate, I think. And I really enjoyed this book. This is another ex-boyfriend's dad romance, but it threw in a lot of other tropes that I love. Boss employee because she becomes the dad's secretary. They have a dom-sub relationship. He owns a sex club. It's a great time if you enjoy the ex-boyfriend's dad trope as much as I do. Definitely check that one out. A book that I would reread, 100% reread Legends and Lattes. I can see myself going back to that book when I want something quick to put me in a great mood. I also think I would reread Medusa. This is a Medusa retelling from her point of view, telling her story, and I absolutely loved this. And then eventually, not anytime soon, but eventually I could see myself rereading Still Beating. Books that I'm excited for the sequel of. I'm very excited for the sequel of The Business of Blood. This is a historical Victorian murder mystery with Jack the Ripper. And the second book just recently came out, I think a couple weeks ago. I loved this book, so I'm very excited to pick up the sequel. Another book where the sequel comes out this month, I think, is The Never King. This is a dark reverse harem Peter Pan retelling, and I really enjoyed this. It's not like the best writing ever, but it was still a good time. It left off on a cliffhanger, so I'm very excited for the sequel. And then the last question is my favorite video that I posted, and definitely that would have to be reading BookTuber's favorite books of 2021. It's one of my favorite videos that I've ever worked on, so if you haven't seen it already, I will link it. It was so much fun, it was so successful, and it is a video where I read some of my favorite books that I have talked about in this video. So that is going to be the end of this quarterly wrap up. Definitely let me know if you guys liked the style that I did this in, and also if you have any additional questions that you want me to add to this that I can answer in the next quarterly wrap up. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!